This is Unit 3, Chapter 10, the 1940s, and it's also going to include the 1950s. This is a time period where the United States is getting over the lingering effects of the Great Depression. Our economy is going to pick up as we start to create different types of war materials to send to support our allies, Great Britain. You have President Franklin D. Roosevelt secures a third term, and that signals that there's a lot of public confidence in his leadership because you've got a lot of global instability happening right now. You have Nazi Germany making military advancements. You're going to have American foreign policy is going to be reshaped. And you're going to have this gradual shift of the United States moving away from being a strict neutrality country into a more active role in global affairs. So between the domestic and international different forces, 1940 is really a transitional time period. It's going to set the stage for the United States to eventually enter into World War II, and then we're going to emerge as a global power. So we're going to begin, we're not going to discuss World War II because we've already done that in Chapter 9. We're going to begin at the end of the war at the 1945 Yalta Conference. This is a meeting between the big three, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin. Now remember that Stalin enters on the Allied side during World War II after Hitler has stabbed him in the back. Him and Hitler are buddy-buddy, and then Hitler is going to actually invade the USSR. So Stalin's has never been this great person that we want on our side. It was more of a means to an end. So now they're at this conference. They're going to decide how do they divide up post-war Germany. And they're going to divide it up in 1945 into these different separate occupation zones. You're going to have France is going to have a small area. Britain will have a larger one, United States, and then also the USSR. Well, the USSR has Berlin, and they are not excited with the territory that they have at all. It's not what they want. They feel like what they wanted and what they said at the conference, the other two just pretty much ignored, which they probably did. So this is going to begin issues, and the United States and the USSR are going to go straight into the Cold War. So Churchill, in 1946, he's the guy on, hopefully your left with the black hat, he says that an Iron Curtain has descended on Eastern Europe and has separated now the Soviet Union from Western Europe. Iron Curtain is a metaphor that we now have this huge ideological difference, which we're going to have. We're going to have Stalin wanting communism and the Western Europe and Western world wanting more of a democracy. So Stalin in 1948, he is going to block all of the access to West Germany, West Berlin. He's going to cut off any supplies from the British, the French, the American forces coming in and helping the Berlin people. So you're going to begin to have really just a complete cutoff of communication between Eastern and Western Europe. So this just is a slide that kind of goes over the different things that both sides have. You have the United States and you have the USSR beginning the Cold War really just straight after World War II, 1945. Both of these two superpowers are determined to shape the post-war world according to their own political ideology. Okay? Neither side, the US or the USSR, neither one of them have any clear long-term strategy. They're both just going to react defensively to whatever the other actions the other one does. And they're both trying to create this balance of power in their favor. So you have different things on each side. You have the United States with a strong economy, large military, democratic. Their whole focus is going to be on stopping communism. The United States views communism as being as bad as Nazism. And they're going to look at their pre-war mistakes, which was isolationism. They saw what was happening in Europe. They stayed out of it. They didn't want to deal with anything that was going on, because we don't get into World War II for Hitler or the Holocaust. We get into World War II because Japan attacks us, bombs us at Pearl Harbor, and we're going to take care of Germany, clean that mess up first, and then with our allies turn our full force on Japan. So the United States is looking at their pre-war mistakes of feeling like they should have gotten involved and maybe things wouldn't have been the way they were. And then they're also looking at the policy of appeasement that their European allies used, which the policy of appeasement was given into Hitler as he was breaking the Treaty of Versailles. So they feel that they need to put their boots down and not allow communism to advance. In contrast, the Soviet Union, they are a communist dictator. Stalin is considered a dictator. They want to expand their influence in Europe, and they have always wanted a protective buffer zone in Eastern Europe to prevent another German invasion, which they did not get. So you have two different opposing goals fueling what is going to be known as the Cold War. It's called the Cold War because the U.S. and USSR will never fight directly. They're going to use other, what they call satellite countries. Other countries are going to fight for them. Okay, but the U.S. and USSR will never line up on a battlefield against each other. They'll just be the people in the back who are financing and putting their armies in these different wars. Okay, so the U.S. right now has a very strong economy. Of course, the USSR had a war going on there. And we're going to use what we're going to call the Truman Doctrine, and I'll discuss the policy of containment and the Marshall Plan in the next slide. But our whole goal is to contain communism and not let it spread to any other countries. And then the Soviet goal, which is the USSR, is of course to end capitalism, which they don't really even have, but to complete, have more communism countries join their side. All right, so how I teach this time period is kind of think of the U.S. as one team and the USSR as another team. Again, neither team has any type of strategic long-term game plan. They just respond to whatever moves the other one makes. But Team USA, they're going to do what's called the Truman Doctrine. Okay, March 1947. In this doctrine is the idea of containment. We want to contain communism in the USSR, in China, in North Korea, wherever we're dealing with it, and not have it spread into the other country. Because if it starts spreading, if one country is communist and the bordering country is not contained, not protected, then communism spreads into that country and communism spreads into the other country, and you have what's a domino theory. One country after another fall into communism, just like dominoes fall. So that is what they're trying to prevent. So that's this idea of containment. Well, they're going to come up with what's called the Marshall Plan. And the Marshall Plan is money. We're going to pay you said country, if you join the U.S. team and contain communism, keep it out of your country, we're going to give you money. And that is kind of their game plan. So containment and the Marshall Plan again, money, that all goes with the Truman Doctrine. All right, so let's look at this slide. This might help a little bit more. So we have both countries, balance of power. Nobody has a plan. The United States, our alliance is called NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which we still have NATO to today, and hopefully we will always have it. We are anti-communist. Truman is our president. Our plan is going to be called the Truman Doctrine. We're going to stop the spread of communism. And how we're going to do that is we're going to use the Marshall Plan to pay money to any country that is going to help stop the spread of communism and not let communism into their country. And our overall plan is our team members are going to be all different little satellite countries, and that's who we're going to use to play our game with. Then you have the other side, which is the Soviet Union, USSR, which is Russia. They have a small alliance called the Warsaw Pact, which doesn't exist anymore. They are communist, and their leader is Stalin, and he is a dictator. Their plan is to spread communism, and they again are fighting for world power by using satellite countries. So they want all the countries, the same countries we're going after, to join their team and be communist. Okay, so we got our two teams. Hopefully you understand that. So now we have our different events. One of the first ones is going to be called the arms race. Arms means weapons, okay? So we know that the United States wins the arm race because obviously we dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's what ended the war with Japan. So the USSR in 1949, they start to test their first atomic bomb. But again, we won because we did ours in 1945. Well, both sides start to build up their bombs and create their arsenal. And at some point, they're like realizing that, hey, if we actually use these, it'll be called a guaranteed mutual devastation. Meaning if you fire your bomb at me, I fire my bomb at you, and then neither one of us are really here to discuss anything further. All right, so let's go back to the Berlin airlift. So the Berlin airlift in 1948-49, this is what I was talking about with how the capital of Berlin is divided amongst the Allied powers and the Soviet that falls into both zones. So Stalin does a blockade of not allowing supplies in on any of the supply routes, which you can kind of see in that map. And so the Allies, they don't, first off, you got to remember that Germany is a war-torn country. Okay, buildings are blown up, they don't have food, it's a disaster. So Stalin is just going to starve off the people by not allowing any supplies. So what the Berlin airlift is, since the Allies can't get in to bring the food and supplies, they are going to fly planes over the area and they're going to drop food to the people, and that becomes known as the Berlin airlift. All right, so this is 1949, the formation of NATO, and you can see how many countries are actually in NATO. And like I said, NATO still exists, and you probably will hear the word NATO if you watch the news on different things. And what it means is if you hit one of our countries, we all come together as one force and we all fight together. Now, the only time that the alliance has been called into action to date is when September 11th, when the U.S. was attacked. All of our allies came together with us to fight against the war on terror. So we are the only country that has called the alliance into action. All right, then you have the Warsaw Pact. That was what the Soviet Union had. And again, the important thing here is remember NATO, and it is our North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and it is our alliance that we still have with all the other countries, our allies. Okay, so we have the Cold War in Asia. This is the Communist Revolution in China, 1949. Mao Zedong, that's your little dude in the front. So he is going to create the People's Republic of China. The Soviet Union is going to back them again because he is a dictator and he is communist. He is going to create some plans that are just not going to work out too well. He wants China's economy and society to become a rapidly industrialized, and he wants also to have a stronger farming economy. So his plan is called the Great Leap Forward, and it's in 1956. And he's going to force millions of peasants into what are collective farms. Same thing that Stalin does in the USSR. And that's one of the problems with Ukraine is collective farming is your little private farms that you have that create your money and also feed your family. We're now taking all of those farms. And you will now give us all the money that you would have created from selling your crops, plus the crops to feed your family, and we will give you what you need. So if you had basically communism on cow economics here, if you had 2 cows, one cow to feed your family, one cow to milk and get your milk to feed your family, and the other cow, you got the milk and you sold it. So both cows were working for you. One was to feed your family, one was to create some financial, incentives. What would happen in communism is the government's going to come and take both of those cows, and then they're going to give you a cup of milk every day because that's all they feel that you need. They will control your cows now, and you will get a cup of milk. Okay, so Mao Zedong, what he does is he is going to, in 1966, create what's known as the Cultural Revolution. So, Dictatorship 101, you have to control the knowledge that comes into your country, that is in your country, if you want to control your people. You have to control the knowledge. So you have to control what they think. You have to control what they have access to information, what they hear, what they're told. You have to control it. So, not very excited about this plan. I do not suggest you do it. But he has his Red Guards, which is his little military. They're going to go kill all the teachers, all the professors, and anybody with any intellectual ability at all. Because again, you cannot control a country if you have people who have access to news, who have knowledge, who can think critically and realize what you're doing. So he's going to do the Great Leap Forward, taking over everybody's farms, which that's going to kill tens of millions of people because they're going to starve to death because the people he puts in charge have no idea how to farm. And then he's going to kill all of the people with intelligence, your teachers, your lawyers, your doctors. He's killing all of them. So that's not going to be very helpful. So he just throws his whole country into chaos and violence. And this is how he takes over his country. Okay, this is fascinating. It really is. Um, this is known as the atomic age. Okay, and you're going to have all of this stuff. Okay, you're going to have these atomic parties, atomic tourism, where people actually go to Las Vegas, and they would go and they would, have their party in Las Vegas and their atomic little cute little different drinks, and then they would go out as a group and watch an atomic explosion. Then you have the fashion with the atomic skirts, the billowing skirts that you see the women wearing. You have the bikini that comes straight from the atomic age. And then you had radium. And they would put radium in their beauty products, in their teeth, and in on their face, in the makeup, so they would glow. And of course, they actually are going to glow. So you had all of this. It's amazing that anyone lived in the 50s. You had these crazy, dangerous children games. Um, you had civil defense up there, um, where you had duck and cover. So you see the children under their desks. So in case there's an atomic explosion, you guys have your shooter drills and your fire drills. But in case there's an atomic explosion, you are to crawl under your desk to survive. Don't know how well that would work. So you also have your comic books. Okay, your comic books are going to start during the Great Depression, and you're going to have Superman, who Superman is actually some Jewish boys created Superman, and then, a large company buys it and takes it from them. That's why Superman has like the high cheekbones. Then you have Captain America, that's going to be during World War II, and Captain America is going to be who fights Hitler. And the soldiers in World War II, they used to get a comic book, cigarettes, and a chocolate bar were the little gifts that went over to the soldiers. Anyways, when the atomic age starts, as far as comic world, it begins with this being a very bad thing. So you have Godzilla. He becomes a symbol of the dark side of radiation. Right? He's going to embody all the fears of nuclear war and environmental destruction. Well, Godzilla was at the bottom of the ocean having his little nap, and they tested, somebody put off an atomic bomb in the water, and he obviously woke up on the wrong side of the ocean. And he gets mad, and so he goes and attacks whatever countries. And then you have or I think it's Japan, I don't know. Who does Godzilla attack? You'll have to let me know. But anyways, he goes and attacks him. So the atomic age radiation is this fearful thing, okay? Then you see this change with radiation being this not really that bad of a thing. It's kind of actually a very cool thing. We're going to put it in our makeup and we're going to glow. And then you see the change to Spider-Man, the hero, the Hulk. You see all these changes in the comic world of radiation being now a superhero. I'm sure because of capitalism. But yeah, this is to me absolutely crazy. Okay, the 1950s. So this is a decade that's defined by transformation and confidence. Remember, we come out of World War II just dominant, huge on the global stage as a superpower, as one not to mess with. and our economy starts to boom. We have different things going on. We're going to do the GI Bill to help our veterans get educated. You're going to have the American dream being reached. We're going to have mass production. You're going to have the spread of television. But then we're also going to have some negative things like the Red Scare, McCarthyism, and the Korean War. We're also going to begin the civil rights movement and see some real differences in long-standing challenges that we've had with racial inequality. But we're going to start to see some different social changes that are going to be made in this time period. Okay, so one of the big things, becomes this huge national drama. Um, People, you've got to realize that the government, if you can get the people to fear something, you can control so much. So Senator McCarthy is going to create what's going to be known as McCarthyism. We're going to have, we already had, but we're going to really put it into action, the House it's a committee, and it's called the House of Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC. So if you're doing something un-American, this is the committee. Kind of reminds me of the French Revolution and the Reign of Terror. All right, sorry, back to U.S. So we're going to start in 1951, really starting to get aggressive in our investigations in this committee. And Senator McCarthy is going to really start putting a lot out there that communism is in actors, musicians, professors, different government workers. They're going to start having public hearings, and there's going to be this blurred line between justice and what is truth and where there's evidence and what's just hearsay and what's spectacle. And to me right now, what we're going through right in this day and age is these immigration raids and ICE and all this other stuff where they're not basing anything on fact. They're just throwing a big net out there. You might just be standing there and they're going to bring a big net in and everybody is going to be illegal and immigrant. It just doesn't matter. They've built the fear, and they have built organization that can just go after. And so we're going to have this very extremely blurred line on constitutional rights, justice, facts, and what actually doesn't exist. And that's what's happening with McCarthyism. Are there communists in the country? Yes, there are at this time. There are some spies in the country. But going through and kind of sorting what is where the issue is. It's not, it's not that it doesn't exist. It's how you're doing it. You just are claiming that one person is this with no evidence. So this is going to infiltrate through the highest levels of American society. Between 1950 and 1954 is going to be when rumors are going to end careers, get people arrested, and all sorts of things are going to be happening. Okay. Sorry about that. If I stop the recording, it gets all messed up. All right. So McCarthyism and communism becomes a big issue. All right. So we're going to go into the Korean War. This is the first war where I'm talking about the satellite countries. So if you look at the map, you have China, that's communist, North Korea, communist, North Korea, supported by the USSR. Same as North Vietnam, supported by the USSR. South Korea is supported by the United States. Okay? My father actually fought in World War II, and then he fought in Korea as a Marine. Okay, so 1950 to 1953. What's going to happen is they've got Korea um, drawn, split between North and South at the 38 parallel. And the idea is that they're going to eventually reunite Korea. But as of right now, North Korea is standing with communism, containment, we don't want it spread. So South Korea is going to be anti-communism, and we're going to protect South Korea. So the Korean War never really ends. It just kind of says, okay, hey, South, stay on your side, North, stay on your side. And it begins because the North crosses over into the South, and the South, the U.S. and different allies come to their defense to push the North back over to their side. And like I said, the Chinese will help the North. And so then what happens is there's an agreement to end the war again. The North will stay on their side, the South will stay on their side. And we have what's called the DMZ at the 38 parallel. And the DMZ is a demilitarized zone, and it's going to be at the 38 parallel. Now, I had a friend who works at the DMZ, and she had said that if there was an invasion, nobody at the DMZ would be able to get out in time. So they train them how to survive in the woods, if they could survive at all. So this war has never actually had any formal treaty or end in. It's just kind of left hanging, and it's split at the 38 parallel. And it's still is the same today. And we're going to look at the DMZ here in 1 second. All right, so what we're looking at is the actual DMZ. If you look at the right-hand picture, the large picture, the soldier looking at you is North Korea, okay? Not the good side, okay? So the olive-colored is North Korea. If you look at the guy's boots, that little bar, cement bar that runs across is what separates North Korea from South Korea. So the guy in the forest green with the white on his hat, that is South Korea. That's the free side. So you can look at the other pictures and you can kind of tell which side is north and which side is south. So if you look at the lower left picture, we are looking at the guy facing us. That is North Korea. And if you look at the people with their backs towards us, that is South Korea. North is really considered a totalitarian state, meaning they have total control of everything, of what they feed the people, who eats, who does what. They have prison camps that hold what they call 3 generations of punishment. So you have multiple people born into prison camps that all they ever see is this prison camp, and that's what they believe the whole world is, because it's what their world is. And actually, historians, if we were really talking about what is North Korea, yes, we, United States and the Allies, say it's a totalitarian, total control. But North Koreans themselves, they believe that their leader is not only a god, but also a man. So if that's what they believe, that he is a god and a man, they would actually be living in a theocracy. Either way, do not go visit North Korea. Okay, so our next race between the two countries is going to be the space race. And we might not like admitting to this, but the Soviet Union kind of wins on this. We claim that they don't really win because they just put a dog up in space, which I'm not overly happy about. Um, and we feel the United States that we won because we put a man on the moon. So, anyways, here's another race that we have called the space race. So, in 1957, the Soviet Union they launched Sputnik, and this is the first satellite to orbit the Earth. And then we, in 1958, we create NASA, and that is, you know what NASA is? That's where our space program is it? I don't know where we are with NASA anymore. Um, and we're going to put the first man on the moon in 1969. So technically, they did win the space race, but yeah, we are going to call it on the American side because we put a man on the moon. Okay, good old Castro. All right, so this is going to be more of the Cuban Missile Crisis, which is what we're going to talk about in the 60s. But this is Fidel Castro, and he is going to take over. His revolution forces and him are going to take over the dictatorship that they believed was corrupt and unrest, and he is going to create his own dictatorship. He's going to reshape the country. He is going to start with nationalizing the sugar industry, which is their biggest source of income. You remember where Cuba is. And it's going to change the view of the state, how the state is going to look. He's going to change property rights for the Cuba state, country means state. And he's going to sign major trade agreements with his buddy, the Soviet Union. So Cuba will be communist and they will be Team USSR. Um, what he does that gets US's attention is he's going to seize US owned businesses and land on the island. So this is going to create even a deeper division that the United States and Cuba already had. So that is Fidel Castro, and we are going to learn more about him in the 60s. Okay, let's talk about the American home front. World War II has ended. People have the possibility of the American dream, meaning that you could own a nice house, you could have the things you need, you could have a car, and you could do it on different types of jobs. You could do it in a factory job. You could possibly be a person who worked full time at a store. But people could reach and achieve what they call the American dream. Okay, so some of the big things here is you have the 1944 GI Bill. This still is active, and what it does is it allows people who have served in the military to then get a college education as much as they want, free and paid for by the government. If you think about this and you kind of think of some of your friends who, when they graduate, they go into the military and they say, oh, I'm going to go into the military first and then I'm going to go to college because the military will pay for my college. Well, that is what this is. That's what the GI Bill is. And then you have the 1950s, a growing middle class. And in 1951, you have this idea of moving to the suburbs. Remember, we have the car now, and of course, that's advanced. And so we can drive. We can move out of the city where we might have to take a bus or walk to our job. We can now drive, so we can move out where we have a house, where we have, a little yard. And then you're also going to have the youth culture going towards the absolute horrible rock and roll, right? That's going to ruin the teenagers. And you have Elvis Presley with his little wiggly hips, and this is going to be something that, is going to be little rebel teenagers listening to Elvis Presley. All right, let's talk about civil rights. Okay, so there are some key terms that you need to understand with civil rights. You have back after the Civil War, we have what was called Jim Crow laws. These are state and local laws in the South. And what they did was they pretty much reinforced racial segregation. They controlled the Black American communities, where they lived, where they could work, could they eat, could they go to school, where they sat. So basically, through Jim Crow laws, that, like I said, were state, which would be for you Texas, local, which would be for you Mesquite, what you could do and what you couldn't do. So maybe if you were a Black American, you could not walk on the street after 7 o'clock. If you did walk on the street after 7 o'clock, then you would be arrested and put in jail, and then you would work what was called a chain gang. So it was a way of still enslaving this community. Okay, so that's Jim Crow. Then basically they create a legalized discrimination. Okay, then you have the word segregation. So segregation means a forced separation of people based on their race. So you would have the black bathroom and the white bathroom, the black seats and the white seats, the black school bus and the white school bus, the black school and the white school. Okay, so that is to keep Black Americans unequal under still racial laws, and to keep them away from white Americans. Okay, then you have integration. This word means bringing these two races, because those are the two races that we're talking about, black and white, bringing these two races together to where now there is no black and white bathroom, there's just the bathroom, there is just the water fountain, and all of the education, going to the same school. So integration is bringing these two races together. Okay. Another term you're going to see with the civil rights movement is nonviolent resistance. This comes from Gandhi, who did nonviolent protest in India years and years and years before this time period. And this is, of course, what Martin Luther King Jr., he is going to promote nonviolent resistance. It means that we're going to fight injustice without using violence. You know, when they attack us, they want to attack us back. They want us to attack them back so they can say, look, look what they're doing. They're violent people. But we're not. We're going to show that we are nonviolent, and we're going to fight injustice without using violence. All right. So we're going to start the civil rights movement, and this is going to go through the 1950s and 1960s. You've got several different movements that are going to happen during this time period, and this, of course, is going to drastically shape America. Okay, let's talk about Martin Luther King. All right, so Martin Luther King Jr., this story actually begins with his father, Michael King Sr. He was a Baptist minister from Atlanta, and he was a religious leader in the early 20th century. But in 1934, Michael King travels to Germany for a Baptist World Alliance conference, okay? 1934. This is when Hitler is starting to rise up. Okay, let me go back for a second. Back when we had just the Catholic Church during the Renaissance and Protestant Reformation, which the word Protestant means not Catholic, you have a monk called Martin Luther. You might remember this from world history. Martin Luther believed that you did not have to do certain works to get into heaven. You just had to have this relationship with Jesus, that the Bible should be printed in a language that you can read. And so he didn't want to break from the Catholic Church, but he did want to reform the Catholic Church. So anyways, he is the founder of the entire Protestant movement. And again, there's Catholic and then Protestant. That word means not Catholic, and that's where Baptist, Methodist, all your other religions that are not Catholic fall under that umbrella. Okay, the thing about Martin Luther is he went through, he was, of course, he wrote all different stuff. He transformed the Bible into German, but because he was German. So Martin Luther, he goes through a dark period when he loses one of his children. And he writes, out of all of his writings, he writes something very, very negative about the Jewish people. And that's important because Martin Luther's looked at as this amazing man, this amazing monk who just transformed and created the Protestant religion and the freedoms of the Protestant religion. So in 1934, what Hitler does is, while he's rising up to start his hatred towards the Jewish people, he finds this one, whatever document or reading that Martin Luther wrote, and he makes propaganda posters out of it, saying, hey, look, Martin Luther even did not like the Jewish people. Martin Luther hated the Jewish people, which wasn't true. Martin Luther had some mental issues, and he just wrote something very dark when he lost a child. So, Michael King, who is Martin Luther King Jr., maybe you're seeing a pattern here. Michael King is over there in Europe. He's a Protestant reformer, so he is very familiar with Martin Luther, the monk, and he sees what's happening in Germany with Hitler, and he sees how Hitler is using this propaganda about Martin Luther, and he's very, very moved by it. He's moved by, he's moved by Martin Luther's desire to change the Catholic Church and to change people's lives. And what happens is Michael King sees what's happening in Germany. He sees what Hitler's doing. He sees how Hitler is using Martin Luther, the monk's writings and, face, basically, who he was, to help support Hitler's movement. So he returns home, and he decides that one of the first things he's going to do in nonviolent protest is he's going to change his name from Michael King to Martin Luther, after the monk, King. And then he also changes his 6-year-old son, Michael Jr., his name to Martin Luther King Jr. So symbolically linking the King's family to Martin Luther, the, monk who was this huge reformer and confronted injustice. So Martin Luther King Jr., the son, he then, of course, becomes an influential leader. Of course, you know who Martin Luther is. For American civil rights, he's going to be nonviolent resistance, right? We talked about that. He's going to study Gandhi, and he's going to travel to India. Gandhi's already dead. He was assassinated in 1948. So Martin Luther King Jr., he is going to travel to India, meet with Gandhi's family and followers, learn more about Gandhi's nonviolent civil disobedience, and then he's going to come back and he's going to lead the civil rights movement. You're going to have the Montgomery bus boycott. He is going to have his famous letters from the Birmingham jail, his I Have a Speech dream, and he's going to, of course, help push forward the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. He's going to be assassinated in 1968. But I don't need to tell you who Martin Luther King Jr. is. You know who he is. I wish we had some more Martin Luther King Jr.'s. Okay, let me see if I can get to our very last slide, which it doesn't seem to want to go. Ah, there we go. Okay, this is the last slide. So back when we were talking about segregation, in 1896, remember the Civil War ends in 1865. So in 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson, this is important, they create what's called separate but equal. Okay, there's no problem. We're going to have a black water fountain, a white water fountain, but they will be equal in quality. Black bathroom, white bathroom, equal in quality. Black school, white school, equal in quality. Okay, so it's called Plessy versus Ferguson. That's the lawsuit. 1896, Supreme Court. They're going to uphold racial segregation. So we're still going to have racial segregation, but it's going to be separate but equal. Well, I don't need to really tell you that it probably was not equal. Okay, so that is an important case to remember. That's what kind of starts this whole thing. Later on, so that's what I say, 1896. Later on in 1954, you're going to have Brown versus the Board of Education, another lawsuit, and it's going to overturn segregation in schools. Okay, it's going to overturn this black school, white school, separate, black and white, but equal. It overturns that, and all schools in the United States are supposed to integrate, which if you remember, integrate means bring black and white children together and give them all the same education, the same advantages, the same everything, which I'm sure you know that's not going to go smoothly. Thurgood Marshall, he's going to argue, he's a black Supreme Court justice, he's going to argue that segregation itself made equal education impossible. Okay? So this is going to make it unconstitutional to have segregation in schools, which mean that you can't have the black school, you can't have the white school. Everything needs to be under one, and everybody needs to be treated. So that's overturned in 1954. So each local area is going to, oversaw by the state, is going to have a thing with their school where they have to check off different, they have to do different things to become what they're called integrated. Okay, so each school, each district is going to be overseen by state and local officials to make sure that they fully integrate. They check off all the boxes. They have, equal protections, equal education. The teachers are both black and white, equally paid, equally in the same jobs. The students have equal access and all of this different stuff. And remember, this is 1954. Interestingly, Dallas ISD does not get off the integration list saying, okay, y'all are fully integrated. You have done all of the stuff until the 2000s. I think it's 2017 when they actually get everything they're supposed to do done and be considered fully integrated. And Dallas has been around since the 1900s, Dallas ISD. Okay, so this idea is going to be tested in this famous case called the Little Rock Nine. It's going to be the first, it's 9 students in 1957 who are going to move to an all-white school, Little Rock Central High School in Arkansas. So the 9 black students are going to attempt to enroll at a previously all-white school. They're going to be met with violent mobs, and the Arkansas governor is going to attempt to block their entry. So although it is now a constitutional law that we now, because of Brown versus the Board of Education, we are now integrating all of our schools. We no longer have segregation. The actual governor of Arkansas is going to ignore the order and do everything he can to block the kids. So Eisenhower is going to have to send federal troops. Eisenhower's the president. He's going to send federal troops to escort and protect these students. So this crisis demonstrates that even though it's a legal ruling, it's a United States law, federal enforcement was still required. So Little Rock 9 become the symbol of courage and struggle for civil rights and education equality. Okay, so then we also have, let me find the other one. Emmett Till. Okay, let me tell you his story because it's not a good one. The Little Rock 9, they're going to be harassed, and you can just imagine what their little lives are like. Okay, and those people are still alive, the Little Rock 9. You can find some interviews from them. Okay, so 1955, the 14-year-old boy, you see his little hat down there. He's in the left-hand corner. Emmett Till. He is going to travel from his home in Chicago, which, you know, the North was more accepting, did not have as many civil rights violations as we have in the South. So he travels from Chicago, and he's going to visit some relatives in Mississippi. So he'd grown up in the North the entire time. So he was used to different racial customs than what we had in the South. And he did not really understand the dangers of what was called the Jim Crow South. So August 24th of 1955, he goes to this grocery store, a small store owned by a white couple, Roy and Caroline Bryant. And Caroline, the wife, claims that Emmett whistled at her. Okay, so that accusation in the South put a black person's life in danger. Okay, so she claims, the wife claims that this 14-year-old boy whistled at her. So 4 days later, August 28th, the husband and the half-brother, they kidnap this little boy, this 14-year-old boy, from his uncle's house. They beat him and they shoot him and they dump his body in the river, weighing it down with a cotton gin fan. So when his body's recovered, it's disfigured and was really hard to identify him, but they were able to identify him by a ring that he wore. So anyways, this was, in this time period, of course, just a huge uprising and trying to shock the nation of, look what has happened. Look, they're accusing this boy, a 14-year-old boy, of whistling at a white woman, and this is enough to brutally kill him. So the two people who killed him, Bryant and Millam, they're put on trial for murder. There's all this evidence that they did it, but it's an all-white jury. It's in the South, and they come back not guilty. So Emmett Till's murder, and he was not the first, and he's not the last. he becomes this turning point in civil rights movement. His death is used to expose this cruelty of Jim Crow, and the entire country is inspired. And these new generation of activists that are going to really unite and build under Martin Luther King, they're going to use this as a turning point to do something. And little Emmett Till, he actually ignites just a movement within America that really actually transforms it. Rosa Parks, she is, I really think we do the Montgomery bus boycott later, but Rosa Parks, she doesn't give up her seat, and there's white seats in the front, black seats in the back. She won't give up her seat that she's sitting in, and there's going to be a big bus boycott of in Montgomery for over a year until they see a difference in how they're treated on the bus. Okay, we are done.